thank you all for coming to Bayonet Apartments. Julie Savin, President and CEO of Eastern Connecticut Housing Opportunities. We're a nonprofit housing developer in Eastern Connecticut, and you're sitting in a 28-unit building with a gym over here in this wonderful community space that was completed in February of 2024. And across the parking lot, just completed last month, is its sort of sister building with 36 units. We believe in an economic, diverse community, so when we do our planning for who's going to live there, it is levels of income all the way up to market rate. So we try to embrace what the community looks like where we're building. And so that's what we have here. We have 64 units. We used 2 different models for each building. This had 7 different layers of funding in its stack. And the one across the way had 1 funder and two different funding sources. So that was a piece of cake compared to when you do a LIHTC deal. This is a low-income housing tax credit deal, this building. We used 4% credits, and we layered in from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, has an affordable housing program. We layered in the grant program from there, also a reduced permanent interest rate. We borrowed a 20-year mortgage from Liberty Bank. We have Department of Housing funding in here. We used a CHFA construction loan taken out by permanent funding as well as Liberty Bank. We also have energy rebates from Eversource. And and then from CHFA also has another state tax credit program called HTCC. That was $500,000. So it all is about $12 million to build this building, and believe it or not, just about the same across the parking lot. Hi, come on in. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker, Seema Malani. She's with Deep now. We've known her for a little while. She's going to come up. She's going to tell you a little bit about herself, her organization, and her programs. Seema?
Thank you. All right. I'm Seema Malani with Connecticut Deep. I am the Office Director for the Office of Affordable Housing Energy Retrofits. And so glad to see you all here. Today I will keep it pretty high level. Just a minute, let me get into this. Okay. All right. So today the focus is on new construction, right? We are all sitting in an affordable housing complex. I think we all feel why we need energy efficiency, how it improves comfort. We're all, pretty comfortable here. We want to make sure they perform well. So a lot of reasons. I'm going to be talking more about why we need to include energy efficiency into these projects. So why does it really matter? The pressures are increasing for buildings to perform. And it hits housing more than anything else. What used to be background decisions, they have been becoming more central to the overall cost, overall economics of housing these days. So with that context in mind, I wanted to share Connecticut climate goals. We have 45% reduction by 2030 and a path to net zero by 2050. These impact investments, these impact incentives, these impact building codes. That's why we need it. And housing is at the center of these energy trends, because buildings are a big part of the emissions and housing is a big part of buildings. And this is where we see a lot of efficiency possible. So that's one reason. Housing also sits at the intersection of energy and affordability. Energy costs are becoming larger and more visible in the overall housing costs, and for renters, these impacts are often felt more directly. And energy costs are one of those few components of housing costs that can be directly influenced through design. And since we are all here for new construction, so I can't emphasize that enough. Even modest reductions in energy use can translate into meaningful savings over time, which shows up directly in how these projects perform. At the same time, we are seeing hotter and longer summers, which means more mechanical cooling. This means higher energy use and higher peak demand. System sizing is based on peak conditions, so even small increases in peaks can really have an outsized impact on both capital costs and long-term performance. So when we talk of energy efficiency, we are really talking about capital allocation decisions, how you invest upfront to manage these costs, you manage risk over the life of the building. We know your realities. We know the constraints are real. You're navigating tight budgets, complex funding sources. But the reality is performance is no longer just a design choice. We see it as a financial decision. So this brings us to a key point: build it right the first time. By the time a project reaches construction, most of the long-term cost structure is already locked in. You can't do much about it. But these buildings are going to be around for decades, and expectations around performance will continue to increase. The cheapest time to build is right at the design stage. At its core, energy efficiency is really about cost containment and risk management. All right, so case for electrification. Oh, I see a C missing there, electrification. We are starting to see more projects move towards all electric design using heat pumps. Because instead of managing separate systems for heating and cooling, you're just using one system to do both. You have fewer systems, less coordination, and a more streamlined overall design. It also reduces exposure to fossil fuel prices, the volatile one that we're seeing these days. And the beauty is, as the grid gets cleaner, electric buildings get cleaner automatically. And with all electric buildings, the other thing is renewables like solar storage start to become more attractive. They act as a hedge against future energy price volatility, exposure to peak demand costs, things like that. We all know the split incentive challenge. We are seeing that stronger projects are designing around it. So they reduce the total design demand, energy demand upfront by building better envelopes, smarter systems. So the cost is lower regardless of who's paying the bill. So it doesn't become such a big issue. And predictable energy costs support tenant stability, reduces operating costs for owners, and in affordable housing, lower utility costs may support higher allowable rents while maintaining the overall affordability. And ultimately, lower OPEX improves NOI, strengthens underwriting, and we can support better buildings. Early integration changes the financial picture. We often hear that they're expensive, a lot of things. But really speaking, if they're integrated right at the design stage, right when you start thinking about the projects, then I think it is really beneficial. Systems can be right-sized, incentives can be layered in effectively, and the cost gap between a standard construction and high performance building is very minimal then. Okay, so I can't stress enough about resilience. We have all seen the frequency of extreme weather and natural disasters increase. We are coming out of a record called winter. We've seen heat waves and flooding. We saw it in Navigate Valley, August of 2024. There was just so much of flooding. And buildings that aren't prepared face real risk and unplanned costs. And especially for the affordable housing sector, they are least, most vulnerable to these costs. With that, the good news is there are programs and incentives available to help projects pencil out. These are some of the offerings for new construction projects. These are designed to close the gap and not add complexity. And the speakers after me will go into these programs a little bit in more detail. We have a few initiatives in the pipeline. The first one is the multifamily revolving loan program. We have an RFI open through April 15th. We would really like your input on it. It's for retrofits only, multi-family affordable retrofits, and it supports energy efficiency, electrification, but there is funding for pre-development costs, for resilience items, for health and safety barriers, and like. So trying to make it very flexible, but we would love to hear your input on that. Then we have the heat pump accelerator. The accelerator by itself is only for the retrofits, and it gives out midstream incentives for heat pumps, but they have community grants which would be available even for the new construction. So, it should be rolled out sometime this year. And then we have the climate resilient energy code. It helps you how to design and what ought to take, making energy efficiency right there. And I'll end with every design decision made today will show up in cost, comfort, and operations for the next 40 years. This is an opportunity to build housing that performs better, not just on day one, but for the entire lifespan. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Jennifer, who's been my mentor and someone I've learned a great deal from. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Seema. Yeah, Seema used to work for CHFA until she left for DEEP. Too bad for CHFA, but very good for DEEP. So we miss Seema at CHFA. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Landau. I've worked at CHFA for about 15 years now. I lead the team of architects within the multifamily department at CHFA. For those that might be unfamiliar with CHFA, we are a mission-based lender of affordable housing. We allocate the LIHTC low-income housing tax credits for the state of Connecticut, and we also offer construction and permanent financing through our organization. The team that I lead at CHFA, we are the Architectural and Construction Services team. If some of you might know us, we were formerly known as Technical Services, but we are now ACS. My staff includes licensed architects, and we evaluate affordable multifamily housing projects seeking funding as well as LIHTC. We look to all applications for compliance with our design standards and guidelines, and we really look to minimize construction cost and mitigate construction risk wherever possible. My team and I, we lead on all matters relating to architecture, construction, hard cost, environmental and energy and sustainability measures. And we work really closely with the Department of Housing and other state agencies such as the State Historic Preservation Office, DEEP, Connecticut Green Bank, Connecticut Department of Public Health, and other agencies. And we really look to ensure that safe, cost-effective, sustainable, and energy-efficient multifamily housing is developed using our funding in LIHTC. I wanted to talk just a little bit about our multifamily design and construction standards. We have had construction standards at CHFA for over 20 years now, and they really look to recommend high-quality building materials that are durable, they have longevity, there is sustainability and energy efficiency in those measures. But our design standards also really need to be flexible. All of our projects are very different. We have new construction, but we also have minor rehab, so we need to ensure that our design standards provide that flexibility to our developers and customers. We update and publish those design standards annually, and we do have supplementary guidelines that also include construction cost guidelines, environmental and hazardous materials guidance, and energy conservation and sustainability. Our design standards were adopted by the Department of Housing back in August of 2013, and again, they speak to the requirement for high-quality, durable materials in our built assets. I'll be the first one to say I'm not a code expert, but I wanted to at least share this slide about how building codes and fire codes in the state of Connecticut have evolved. They now are more robust than they ever have been in recent years. There's more discussion and requirements for climate resiliency, including structural resiliency, higher energy efficiency with a tighter building envelope and higher insulation values. There's improved life safety measures and fire-rated separations between walls, accessible routes and means of egress, and improved safety for fire protection systems. And in fact, Connecticut was recently ranked one of the 6 best states for building code for coastal storm resiliency, vigorous requirements for snow and wind loading, and they do address the impacts of climate change. And this was rated by the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. To talk a little bit about the energy conservation and sustainability, this is really incentivized through the Qualified Allocation Plan, the QAP, which determines and discusses how LIHTC credits will be allocated. Right now, we do have an open comment period for QAP, so if anyone has comments on the QAP, the public comment period, we will be accepting comments, written public comments through, I think, April 15th. So if you have any comments on the QAP, please submit them to us, and I can get you the address if you need that. But since 2013, our QAP have incentivized various energy efficiency measures, such as the high performance building envelope, renewable energy, such as the photovoltaic solar panels. And since 2016, we have incentivized passive house, high performance building envelope, average Hertz index of less than or equal to 42 or 46, solar and geothermal. And we also incentivize various green building measures such as the LEED, Gold and Platinum, National Green Building Standard, Gold and Emerald, the Emerald Enterprise Green Communities, and the Living Building Challenge. We also include incentives for digital literacy and connectivity, including broadband. And we always look to our utility partners for rebates and incentives that they might provide for our projects. Some of the challenges we're seeing, and this is some of the things we're really struggling with right now. We're seeing very high construction costs, and these are just some of the issues that we're dealing with for our projects. State prevailing wage increases have really impacted many of our projects. Our state housing authorities have really seen this impact their projects, creating gaps in many instances. So this is something that we're continuing to address and look at. There's a very limited skilled labor force in the state of Connecticut. During COVID, many of our highly skilled laborers retired or left the industry. So this is something that's, again, contributing to higher costs in labor. We're constantly battling tariffs on goods, materials, and equipment. So that's something that, again, is increasing our construction cost. Supply chain issues such as switch gears during the COVID pandemic, that was a real issue, getting a switch gear. Sometimes it would take 12 months or 18 months to get one. So we're constantly monitoring the supply chain concerns with our building materials. For passive house, sometimes we've seen construction costs rise, just trying to flush out issues during a passive house project that's under construction. To actually achieve that certification can be challenging. And state historic preservation requirements and impacts also increase the cost that we see. So these are all challenges that we're currently dealing with, and we're hoping that some of the other funding sources can try to alleviate some of these concerns that we're seeing. And I will turn it over to Nick.
This podium is going to be a little bit of an issue. I like to talk with my hands a little bit. And I'm going to have a couple of pop quizzes throughout this to keep you guys awake. So I'm Nick Jones. I run our residential new construction program for Eversource in our energy efficiency group. I've been doing that for 14 years now. So been in the industry a long time. I don't think I have to really talk to this group about these things, but I think Seema really hit the nail on the head. When we're talking about efficiency in the built environment, we're not just talking about energy efficiency, we're not just talking about kilowatt hours, we're talking about efficiency as a risk management solution, right? Better envelopes are better moisture barriers, they're better sound actuators, so there's a lot of benefits that come from efficiency that aren't just wrapped up in kilowatt hours saved and CCF saved. And I think that's a really important point to drive home here. The other thing that we have to keep in mind, and I think, again, this comes as no shock to anybody in this room, but a lot of the homes and buildings that we're constructing today they're going to outlast this energy transition. So even if it takes 30 years to get that wind turbine up, right? These houses that we're building today are going to outlast that energy transition. There will be a time when that grid is, fully renewable or fully sustainable, and the homes that we're building today are going to be around long after that transition is made. So this is some old data from Connecticut, from DECD, new housing authorizations. Nothing to really take note of here, except for this trend in multifamily, trend in the density that we're seeing throughout the state, right? Over the last 10 years, this has sort of shifted quite a bit. So if you look at number of new housing authorizations, by and large, multifamily is king now. So 5+ units really takes the cake here in new housing authorizations. Interesting thing about these numbers, these don't even include those, well, first of all, they don't include high-rise or commit to high-rise for that matter, but they also don't include gut renovations, which we're seeing a lot of adaptive reuse in the state, a lot of conversion projects in the state. So just a ton of building going on in the multifamily realm, and I think with my next slide we'll understand why that is. So first pop quiz, Connecticut Fair Housing Study. Has anybody heard of it? Show of hands. How many new houses do we need in Connecticut by 2030? New housing units?
12,000. 90 to 180 or something.
Yeah, 120,000. Yeah, it's great. I mean, where are we going to do that in Connecticut? We're one of the most developed states in the country. We're running out of land. So if you look at the map of where these houses are being built, right? These are single-family detached homes, so new housing authorizations. And we're doing a decent job, right? So I'm going to step away from the mic for a second. Image on the left here, new housing authorizations. You can ignore the one on the right, that's just program participation. But every town in the state of Connecticut over the last 5 years has pulled at least one permit for a new home. So doing pretty well there. All right, second pop quiz. Image on the right is 5+, so multifamily new housing authorizations. Anybody want to take a guess how many towns over the last 10 years haven't pulled a single permit or a new housing authorization for a multifamily project?
143.
No, almost, yeah, not that high. One more guess? Anybody?
120.
83. So you guys are shooting high. Yeah, so 83 towns over the last 10 years. Yeah, 83 towns over the last 10 years. And of the towns that have pulled a permit, the top 10 make up about 60% of those units over time. So pretty sparsely populated in distinct regions throughout the state here, little pockets of the state. Stanford's its own universe. And so one of the things that we think about when we're developing our efficiency programs, particularly our new construction program, is how do we react to those market changes and those market conditions? And we do so in two ways, right? So there's a lot of focus going on right now in the multifamily realm. And of course, one of the programs or one of the certification offerings that makes the most sense in multifamily, at least in my mind, when you have higher internal gains and conducive window-to-wall ratios is passive house. And so we do two things in the passive house realm, or the high-performance building realm. We have incentive offerings, and then we have training offerings. And our training offerings have been around now for, better part of 10 years. Initially, they were focused on passive house. We've since sort of layered on additional training offerings for electrification. We also do a lot of code training through that when new code is adopted or new energy code is adopted in the state. We'll do a ton of training around that, so we'll bring in speakers to be able to do that kind of training. But we look at this in sort of a tiered approach, right? I mean, we know you guys are busy. Builders are absolutely busy. You're not going to get them out of their 9 to 5. And so you got to meet them where they are. We do a ton of virtual lunch and learns. We're doing some seminar and classroom style training, and then we also have I don't know, some of you might be familiar with this, but we have a passive house. If you go get your passive house credentials in the state of Connecticut, whether as a builder or a rater or a consultant, we're actually offsetting the cost of those exam fees. So if it's $3,000 to get your passive house credentials, we'll actually offset the cost and pay for it, just so you guys can get those. And then we have incentives layered on top of that, so modeling incentives, performance incentives, and then obviously certification incentives. I won't stick on this too much other than to say for the entirety of my time in this position, we've been a performance-based program structure. So we're focused on the HERS index. That's really our main driver. Our base of incentive comes from that HERS index. And we started as sort of this fuel blind efficiency focused program back in January 2016, and then in July 1st of 2023, we were state mandated as part of our 3-year plan to eliminate fossil fuels in RNC and focus more holistically on strategic electrification. Is everybody in here familiar with the HERS index? Show of hands for people who are not. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So the HERS index, I think of it like a golf score. It's basically an asset score that compares your home or dwelling unit to a home or dwelling unit built to code, or 2006 energy code, but I won't get into that. Basically, every point below 100 is 1% energy savings relative to 2006 IECC. So how it works is we have a bench of HERS raters throughout the state of Connecticut, Carla being one of them. And basically what a HERS rater does is they act as a third party to do a lot of the diagnostic testing that's going to be required for code anyway. And they also do a lot of that energy modeling that's also a compliance option for code, but it'll basically assign you that HERS score that you're looking for your house or for your multifamily dwelling. There's a bunch of different reasons to get a HERS rating. Like I said, code compliance being one of them. It's IECC has an ERI compliance pathway. A lot of builders take that route because in a lot of ways it's easier than prescriptive code. There's also utility incentive programs, which I will get into in my next slide. But also, there are various studies out there that show that homes with lower HERS ratings have a higher home resale value. It's a nice marketing piece. So like I said, July 2023, we did switch to an all-electric program. The focus really for me is really sticking to that performance standard though. Focusing on that envelope first. If we can bring down heating loads, then it doesn't matter what you put in there to heat the house or the dwelling unit. You can heat them with a hair dryer if we get these building heating loads down enough. So our base tier, our tier 1 incentive starts at a HERS 55. That's basically the ERI compliance option for code. We layer on our electric water heating. We can have a whole separate conversation about that later on, but for now, I'll suffice to say that in single family, needs to be a heat pump water heater in multifamily, you can still get away with electric resistance in a lot of cases. Then we layer on our balanced ventilation, HRV or ERV, just, it makes sense. Air and ground source heat pumps, I will talk about that in the next slide. And then electric cooking and appliances. Believe it or not, that was the one that didn't get a ton of pushback. I think a lot of people are buying into the induction cooktops, which is awesome. And then this is what everybody's here for, right? So our incentive structure and how we incentivize these projects in RNC. So again, we take a tiered approach. For all intents and purposes, tier 3 is basically a net zero building or a net zero home. Tier 1 and tier 2 is where the vast majority of my multifamily projects fall in here. Essentially, the big driver from tier 1 to tier 2 is that ERV or that HRV. It can make a big difference in that HERS score. And then the domestic hot water is the other one. It's not incredibly, I think Carla will tell you, it's not incredibly hard to get a HERS 45 on multifamily. It is tricky, right? I mean, you still have to have a pretty well optimized building envelope and good mechanical systems, but it's not impossible. So we started at 1,500, we go to 2,500, and then obviously net zero is 3,500. I won't really read right off the chart. You guys can see it. And then new for this year, hot off the press as of this week, we actually upped the ante on the ground source adders. So if you guys are putting in geo or thinking about speccing geo for some of your new construction projects, these are per unit incentives, right? So there's a couple of affordable housing projects that I know of right now that are actually looking at speccing geo for large-scale multifamily. And when you layer on the fact that geo will help you drive to tier 2 at that 2,500 mark, and then you can add on the additional $1,500 per unit for the ground source, that's $4,000 per unit. So it's not chump change anymore. It's not a drop in the bucket. Those are real incentives. And then this is also, in addition, like I said, I think Passive House, especially for multifamily, I can't reiterate this enough. I think Passive House is the best certification or the best standard that we have for multifamily. We actually have some modeling incentives that we put on top of that. So even if you're thinking about, Passive House as an option for your building, just do the feasibility study. It doesn't hurt, right? And if you get somebody on board, if you get a Passive House consultant on board early on, we'll cover the feasibility study whether or not you even go all the way with Passive House. I should mention this is just for multifamily, so 20 plus units. If you're in that gray area where it's a little less, let me know. We can make something work. But on top of that, if you get a consultant on board and you say, okay, well let's entertain this. Let's think about this. We'll actually cover a good chunk of the energy modeling costs as well. So if you get involved with your consultant before 90% design, we'll cover 75% of the modeling costs up to $30,000. And then if you go all the way through and actually get your Passive House certification on those dwelling units, we'll give you $60,000 per project or an additional $1,500 per unit. So really, really robust incentives when you start to stack them, and I'll give you a case study at the end that shows a good project that actually did it. And then the training offering, like I said, this is a huge piece to what we do now. We've done over 70 trainings on 50 plus unique topics. We've brought in people like Gord Cook. We had Sam Rashkin. So we've had a bunch of really good presenters at these lunch and learns. We've done this for over 5,000 total attendees at this point. And in Connecticut and Mass combined, we've gotten 197 people their Passive House credentials over the last couple of years. So pretty successful training offering. And then if you take a quick look, I won't go through this. I'm going to try to fly through my last few here before somebody rips me off the stage. But we do it in 3 different ways. We have a lunch and learn style. Again, we'll meet you where you are. Those are mostly virtual. We haven't really done a ton of seminar style lately. We do have a really good training partner, Stephen Winter Associates, that's put together some really great seminar style training. So we're hoping to do a couple more of those in the next couple of years. And then, like I said, if you're thinking about getting your certification, you can do it wherever you want. As Jen alluded to too, we have a great partnership with CHAF. I can't say enough about how awesome that group is and how much they've really impacted the nature of efficiency in multifamily over the last couple of years. So between 2019 and 2024, CHAF have funded a little over 3,000 dwelling units across 51 new construction projects. Through our continued partnership with CHAF and DOH, we've been able to capture 95% of those projects through the new construction program. So it's a really great partnership, really great synergy with CHAFA between that QAP and our program standards. It's become a really good partnership. And then, like I said, I want to leave you with a really good case study. This is one that Carla actually worked on. I think Carla was one of the project champions for this project. But it was called Eagleville Green. So if you guys aren't familiar, it's right on the southwest corner of UConn's campus up in Mansfield. And back in 2019 or 2020, the town of Mansfield actually redid a lot of its zoning and carved out a small chunk to help promote more affordable housing in that region. And Eagleville was the first application in with that new zoning. So it was a $21 million project across 41 dwelling units. I don't know, I didn't put average HERS index, but anyway, the average HERS index was a 36 on these. So really, really impressive. It was 80% affordable, 20% market rate, all electric. Fias designed it, it really fit the regional aesthetic pretty well. So like I said before, if we're focused on our building envelope, right, then we really don't have to worry about what we heat these things with. So this is the actual modeled passive house heating load. So one of the architects for the project actually did this analysis. So our blue bars here would be the code compliant building envelope, your heating loads over the winter months. Orange bar there shows your passive house heating loads. So it's, I don't know, you guys can do the math, but our code compliant heating load throughout the course of the year on a kBTU per square foot basis was 55. Passive house averaged out to 7 kBTUs per square foot. 7 kBTUs, that's literally a hairdryer. They don't make a mini split small enough in some cases. And then, like I said, they really did an awesome job at being able to stack all those incentives on top of each other. So they got the full $35,000 pre-construction incentive for this one, and then at the end of the day, when they layered on all the different incentives available post-construction, came out to about $465,000. So a little over $500,000 in incentives for this project. So pretty incredible. I think we're going to take questions at the end, but I think I'm going to turn it over to Matt now.
I'm Matt Gilchrist. I'm the president owner of EG Home, also fairly involved with the HBRA. Who is EG Home? So our company is a production home builder, not semi-custom, definitely not custom, and we're really proud of that fact. Last year we built 80 houses. Every single one of them was zero energy ready or zero energy. This year we'll close 100 homes. Every single one of them will be zero energy ready or zero energy. We have 54 team members. We have 5 active communities, and we have a 2,500 square foot design center. But the most important thing about how we build our homes is our process and how we make sure that the homes, are sold, programmed, constructed, and then warranted, in a very systematic way to not only deliver the zero energy or zero energy ready platform, but also, the standards that we desire for our homeowners to experience. Several years ago, DJ Harris, wave your hand, sat in one of our leadership meetings. We were talking about trying to get to Energy Star. We were just a code builder, and we were trying to get to Energy Star, and we were coming up with a pipeline. And he kind of threw a challenge. I think it was an ultimatum, but I'm not sure. He said, I will work for a company that builds zero energy homes. He was pretty important to our leadership team, so I'm like, so will I. So we took that threat, ultimatum seriously, and we kind of got on board. And we said, okay, this is going to be a differentiator for EG Home. But while we were doing that, we're like, well, why would we do this? So it's what our customers want. So on the bottom, you can see that energy efficiency is the #1 factor for 11% of the new home buyers out there. It's in the top 3 for 61%. I might need that computer, but no, don't kidding. I'm fine. I'll just squint a little bit more. So our buyers want it. It's important to who's buying our homes. So even more, energy efficiency was in the top 3 for 86% of the people out there. So these 2 studies, this is the home characteristics for new construction home buyers. This was enough evidence to say that, you know what, maybe we need to look at building homes better. Just, hey, we can get away with a code-built home, and a code-built home is much more energy efficient than, most of what people are living in. But maybe we should look into doing it just a little bit better. So how hard is it to get to zero energy ready? So this is an example of all the houses that we built. We have solar panels and moss roofs and wind turbines in the back. But a lot of people think that that's what we're talking about when we're talking about zero energy homes. Nick was just talking about the HERS rating, so I don't need to go through it, but code is 55. To even get into the realm of zero energy or zero energy ready, you have to hit the 45. We achieve 40, we're below 0 if we're including the solar panels on most of our homes. But that's not really what's important to the zero energy platform. It is the rest of the checklists. It's the rest of the stuff that goes into the house. It's how we waterproof the house, how we make sure the drainage runs away from the house. It's the backflow preventer that we put on our footing drains. It's all those things that line up into all those checklists from, I'm actually got it on another slide, that make that house a zero energy home. Even with all the energy rebates, it still costs more. So, we do between $15,000 and $2,000 per home. That's what it costs, is $15,000 to $20,000 per home. The rebates we get from $5,500 to I guess $1,250, but I have $11,000 on there. And we're still getting the federal tax credits of the 45L for another 3 months. And that was a big deal, the $5,000. Federal government has basically annihilated any incentives that we have to build better. They're really helping us build worse cars and make sure that we burn more gas, but they don't want better houses. So we're gonna have to work on that in the future. But the #1 reason is all the way at the bottom. I should have made it bigger. We believe that it adds $30,000 of value to our homes. So we spend 15 to 20 to get there, but we're adding $30,000 of value to our buyers. So I think our buyers are willing to pay $30,000 more for our home than they are just a code-built home. And that's before we put the solar on. And I have 80 people last year and 100 people this year that are going to prove that point for me. Our process to get here, we recommend if you want to do this, if you want to take that next step, partner with a HERS rater. We've partnered with HERS raters. I'm really lucky because DJ is a HERS rater, and he knows this stuff inside and out. So we partner with a good HERS rater. We value and engineer the plans, and you start with Energy Star. Just try to get to that. I know the federal government's changed the names of everything. Now I think I'm not sure what the name is now. It's like Really Good House. Is that what they call it? But we're staying with the old language because people still know it. And then we evolved to Zero Energy and Indoor Air Plus. So we can take that step-by-step approach, that next turn of the wheel, go to that next level. And with this, set up a really good process. You need to have really good checklists. So all these programs come with checklists. It's like right out of the book. You just get to have them. We've taken those checklists, and the HVAC guy has to do his certifications and his inspections and the HERS rater. But we've integrated all those checklists into step-by-step QA/QC policies that each one of our construction managers executes at every single step of the house. And like I was saying before, it's not just, hey, it's a really, energy efficient home with a decent HERS score. HERS score is the easiest part of the whole process. It's making sure that you're doing it right, all the steps. And the most frustrating thing for us has been several times we've gotten it all right, and then we start finishing the house, and we're getting the finishes done, and somebody's like, oh, we forgot something, and they poke a hole in the side of the house, or they take a shortcut and they do something wrong. So finish strong with your house and make sure that you have that same mentality all the way through putting the final doorknobs on. And again, experience matters, develop a process. At the end of the day, this is your goal. This is for that house right here. This is a townhouse that we have in Oxford Greens. It's a -2 on the MERS rating. All electric heat pump, all electric heat pump hot water heater, induction stoves, electric fireplaces. You can't even find a cigarette lighter in our houses. There's not a flame to be seen. So, we pressed the I believe button, and I was the biggest skeptic of them all. I told DJ, there's no way in hell people aren't going to want the gas stove. They're not going to buy houses, DJ. He's like, let's just try it here. I said, okay, we'll try it. We didn't have one person say, I won't buy it because I don't have a gas stove. And then over time, we get the feedback. This induction stove is more responsive than my gas stove. So it's a better house, it's a better way to build. And I'm not really asking any of the other builders out here to do it because I like the competitive advantage. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Matt. We're going to, just a quick Q&A period. Anybody have any questions for the presenters that you've heard so far?
Just a quick question.
Go ahead.
Nobody complains they don't have a fireplace?
We have electric fireplaces that are amazing.
Okay.
So for the ambiance, it creates that same mood in the house. It's got a little noisemaker that makes it sound like crackle. If you want that thing roaring, you crank up the crackler. But for the most part, people haven't pushed back on that.
Okay.
And also, they have heating units in it, so if you just want to change the heat in the room kind of fast, you can have that little heat blower there, and it kind of gives that same feel.
Great.
Quick question, any concerns with the QAP going into comments, anything that you've heard that we're going to need to take a look at for this year?
With the session that we had yesterday, there was concern about the changes to the sustainable design measures points. So we were encouraging folks to submit public comment, written comments, so that might be potentially an issue. The concern was about, elderly housing not being incentivized, because that is a need. That was a concern that someone had raised. Those are the ones that I'm remembering
Remember,
from the discussion.
and it's still early, so
Yeah,
if
till
anybody has
mid-April, it's open for public comment. Yeah.
Eric?
So Deborah, with the programs you have, is prevailing wages required for every job?
It depends on whether the developer is a housing authority, because a housing authority would be subject to state prevailing wage, but we also defer to the Department of Labor, so you would need to submit your project to them, they would need to look at the funding sources, the developer, and then they would provide that determination, but it's typically housing authorities or those entities that are affiliated with the housing authority.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever done a study on how much more housing we could actually put on the ground if we would remove the prevailing wage restrictions?
As far as I know, CHFA has not, but it is quite a cost to each project, that's for sure, especially in recent years.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So how much or at all, is it primarily the technology that you use in construction of the building, or does the placement on the site and solar angles and is that enough of a factor to be a consideration in the design for both of you?
For single-family homes and townhomes, we would love to pretend like we could always position the houses in the right direction, but really a bigger driver is, okay, where are the wetlands, you know, where are the things that I have to avoid, where are my steep slopes, how do I have to design this to maximize the density that I can safely get. And then when we built the house, we're like, hey, let's try to make as many, you know, south-facing roof lines as we can get. But at the end of the day, sometimes we just have to put more panels on. And that's unfortunate because like you'll have two of the same houses, one could have half of the solar panels, and they're both going to get the same PERS rating just because of solar exposure and the efficiency of that system.
Tree cover as well, correct?
We cut them all down.
That's great.
I have a
True
question.
green building.
Is there any income mix required for any of the incentive programs?
For the QAP, there's guidelines in the QAP, with certain AMI percentages.
Great.
One more question. For the programs that have seen better days after the current administration sort of jockeyed with them and it's made it tough as you're planning and looking at some of the incentives and what to do in especially apartment units, but even single family. What's the outlook as you start planning and trying to encourage people? Like, do you count on things fluctuating maybe to the good at some point, or?
If this is a safe space, I can tell you an anecdotal story and one that I'll never trust a federal tax credit again. But I had builders back in, I was at a design charrette back in 2020. Affordable housing, or multifamily developer. We were in the room with the HERS rater. HERS rater said, there's these great federal tax credits for DOE, housing, zero energy home, very good home program. And I love that, by the way. Straight up, he told me, he said, Nick, he said, by the time this building's finished, those tax credits aren't going to be there. He's like, I'm not doing this for the tax credits. So I never lead with the tax credit discussion. That's why we sort of intentionally built our own specifications too. Like we don't want to be reliant on a federal standard for our program incentives, at least. So that's why we don't in FIAT. That's why I'll preach FIAT all day long. They're a private entity. They develop their own standards. So yeah, I try to stay away from the federal programs.
Gotcha.
All right, we're going to take a quick break for 5 or 10 minutes, and there's water, cookies, and so forth in the corner.
Can I have one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Take gentleman right there.
I was just asking the source of, for the funds that you offer in your incentive program.
Yeah,
Ratepayer funds?
ratepayer funded. Yeah.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll take a quick break, and thank you. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Before I do that, I want to thank Julie Savin again and Echo for hosting us today, and thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to be Katie Shelton from the Connecticut Green Bank.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katie Shelton. I serve as the Senior Manager of Market Engagement for the Connecticut Green Bank. Today's presentation will focus on how to unlock solar savings through Solar Map Plus. By way of an introduction for anybody who's not familiar, the Connecticut Green Bank is a quasi-public state agency founded in 2011 with the goal of accelerating the green economy in the state. And one of the ways in which we do so is through the Solar Marketplace Assistance Program Plus, also fondly referred to as Solar Map Plus. This program was created a few years ago after identifying a gap within the marketplace, which at the time was specifically focused on state agencies and municipalities, where we were receiving a lot of feedback that there was interest in developing solar and storage projects for their facilities. But folks just didn't have the time or resources to dedicate towards evaluating such options, and more so really weren't sure who to trust within the marketplace. So our program, Solar Map Plus, was created really to address the gaps within the market and make an easy button option for solar and storage deployment throughout Connecticut. To date, we've successfully developed over 60 solar and storage projects throughout Connecticut, with many more projects in various stages of development. And we expanded our program about 2 years ago to include affordable multifamily housing, solar and storage project development, providing the no-cost technical assistance and project development support. Most of the projects that are developed through our program have been developed through a third-party ownership structure where there's no out-of-pocket expense required by the property owner and no ongoing operations and maintenance responsibilities. And wherever it makes sense to do so, we look to pair those projects with storage to maximize savings to the property and provide resiliency benefits. To provide an overview of how our program works, we really have kind of a 4-step process where we do a 2-part assessment. Starts with a site analysis, or as we like to call it, a desktop review, where we're gathering as much information for a site as possible. That can include construction drawings, and we're also referencing publicly available resources to determine viability for a specific site and fit for solar and storage. If a site passes that initial screen and the property owner or developer is on board with next steps, we then proceed with a more detailed site analysis and technical review. And the deliverable from that analysis is what's called a site report. Essentially, it's a dialed-in layout, production estimate, and budget for the project so that we can present site-specific economics for a property to review and make contracting decisions off of. If all looks good and we execute an agreement to move forward, we then execute one of the key parts of our program, which is pulling a portfolio of sites together and going out for a competitive bid for contractor selection. The goal there is that we are gaining economies of scale by developing multiple projects as a portfolio, and we are taking the heavy lift out of the equation by running that competitive solicitation. Before I jump into the specifics of the financing products that we offer through the Solar Map Plus program, just wanted to briefly touch upon the incentives that we utilize as part of the project structure for affordable multifamily housing. And specifically for the solar component, we are taking advantage of available investment tax credits at the federal level, which currently exist, but for a very limited time period, as well as incentives that are offered in both UI and Eversource territory through the utility company. Anybody that has explored solar and affordable multifamily housing in the past or completed projects may have developed those projects through the Commercial Solar Incentive Program, which used to be called the LREC-ZREC program, and then transitioned a few years ago into the NRES program. Shortfall of those programs was that it typically limited project development to tying in behind a common area meter for a facility only, and the financial benefit of the solar project didn't trickle down to the residents. So with the restructuring of the incentive program, sites can now take advantage of the residential solar incentive, which is called the RES program. Key benefits here are that you can design one project to benefit both the property owner and residents alike. The applications are rolling, so you're no longer competing against a ton of commercial projects that are vying for a limited pool of funding. And maybe most interesting, the value of the incentive is substantially more lucrative. It's about 38 cents per kilowatt hour for 2026, compared to about 25 cents a kilowatt hour in the commercial program. Because these projects are being incentivized at a higher level, it is a requirement that the financial benefit of solar be shared with the residents of a facility. For sites that are individually metered, where residents are paying their own utilities, pretty simple. All that happens is 20% of the revenue contract that's secured is equally split, and residents will receive an on-bill monetary credit directly from the utility company. For sites that are master metered and or where the property owner may be paying the electric bills for each of the units, those sites are required to carve out the net present value of 25% of that contract to make an eligible improvement that will benefit the residents of the facility. You can see here on the screen that those measures are built out to immediate measures. Typically, those would be things that could be completed within 6 months of the commercial operation of the solar system. And then ongoing measures, which is measures that you would expend funds on over an extended period of time. For the immediate measures, you'll note that energy efficiency measures are included in that category. So it could be things like window upgrades, doors, lighting, anything that's energy efficiency related. You can spend those tenant improvement funds on to improve the living conditions of the facility. So this is particularly important given that a lot of sites are cash constrained, and there may be projects that are on your list that you want to complete that you just don't have the funding to do so, and or you may be in a scenario where you've had some cash overruns on new construction. This is a great place to kind of pick up some of those projects and have the solar project itself pay for the upgrades. Connecticut Green Bank has two financing options that we offer for affordable multifamily housing. The first being a solar lease. When I say lease, most folks automatically think of a car lease or an equipment lease where you're paying a fee to utilize the equipment, and that's not the case with the way that we're structured. It's really structured as a revenue share mechanism where the Green Bank serves as the system owner. We bear all of the development costs associated with the project, and then we simply share in that revenue contract with the residents and the property owner alike. Benefits here are that you're not taking on additional debt as part of the project. Green Bank really bears the development risk associated with the solar and storage installation, and you're simply starting to see money from day one as part of the project. Wanted to include a few case studies here just to show you what the economics look like. On the screen is a rooftop project spread over a campus, which is sized just over a megawatt in size. And you will see here that the cumulative term benefit is expected to total about $3.4 million over the 20-year lease agreement. Again, property owner's not outlaying any cash here. Green Bank bears that development risk. This particular site happened to be master metered, so the tenant improvement funds total just over $1.3 million, and the property owner in this scenario is actually going to be doing some window renovations on site at their facility. Property owner's piece of the pie is about $2.1 million in this particular equation. Again, they're saving money from day one and not investing anything in the project. As an alternative, we do have a solar loan option that is available if owning a system directly is of interest. In a solar loan scenario specifically, the way that it works, because affordable housing tends to have complex capital stack and tends to be debt constrained. The way that we've structured the loan is that 100% of the revenue contract that we secure with the utility company will go to the Connecticut Green Bank. We strip out the debt service that is owed under the loan, and then we cut a check to the property owner for the net difference. So instead of the property owner cutting us a check every month or every 6 months, we're doing the opposite. We're receiving the revenue under this loan structure, stripping out what they owe under their loan, and then they're receiving a payment for the net difference, which serves as their financial benefit under this transaction. Loan has been not a super popular option just because of the nature of affordable multifamily housing, but we've seen it utilized on a few projects, and that was mostly driven by the fact that the property owner wanted to monetize the investment tax credit. With the phase out of the investment tax credit, I would anticipate that the lease option will be a more favorable option moving forward. On the screen here, you'll see the same project with just kind of an overview of how the loan economics worked. This particular project was sized based off of an 18-year loan term. This example was 5.8% interest. Typically, we're about 5.4% interest for this product. And you'll see that the cumulative benefit was about $3.7 million over the term, compared to about 3.4 under the lease scenario. So slightly improved economics, but a lot more risk to the property owner in a loan scenario over a lease. And lastly, just to kind of round out the presentation here, on the screen you'll see a list of participating sites. Green Bank is currently in the process of developing our 4th portfolio of projects. As I mentioned, we like to pair a portfolio of projects together to gain economies of scale when we go out for competitive bid. First portfolio was 8 total sites, second portfolio was 8 sites, and our third portfolio included 11 sites. You'll see it's kind of a mix of housing authorities, nonprofits, for-profit developers. Lastly, in terms of timing considerations, I'll leave you with 2 thoughts. The One Big Beautiful bill that was signed on July 4th of last year essentially created an accelerated phase out of the investment tax credit that's available for solar projects. We have until July of 2026, very beginning of July, in order to start construction or start development on new projects in order to preserve the investment tax credit that would be available. So if there's interest in a site or a portfolio of locations, time really is of the essence to begin those conversations. In addition, 2027 will mark the last year of the RS program. There'll be a successor program that follows. But if there's interest in taking advantage of this structure, encourage you to start those conversations sooner rather than later. And I will hand it over to Leonard from Resonant Energy.
Hi everybody, my name is Leonard Schiller. I'm a Senior Business Development Manager at Resonant Energy. We're a turnkey solar developer based in Massachusetts, and that basically means we build solar projects with financiers like the Connecticut Green Bank, as well as directly with building owners. Founded in 2016, so about 10 years old. Our primary market is multifamily, especially affordable multifamily, and especially new construction. We also work with nonprofits and other small commercial projects. So larger than a single family home, smaller than kind of utility scale grid scale type of project is our bread and butter. So I'll be talking about the federal incentive landscape, and I know Nick said we should never trust the tax credit. But there's a little bit to share there and go a little bit more in detail from what Katie had shared, as well as a little bit of design coordination best practices and underwriting considerations. Kind of like one nugget from each thing. It's a lot to talk about, but I think happy to answer more questions afterwards. So the state of solar. I'm going to move here as well, just because this is a little more easily pointed out. So the current era of solar tax credits is the Inflation Reduction Act era, which is phasing out, as we mentioned. But if you have a project that is going to be built before the end of 2027, a solar project, or that we could lock in via safe harbor, and I'll explain that in a minute, by July 4th, here is the landscape. So it's a 30% base tax credit, with the ability to bump that up to 40 or 50% on a lot of projects, especially affordable multifamily. Some other areas as well, which we can talk about later. But basically, the incentive is pretty ripe still while the time is there. But the peach has been kind of sitting on the counter. We got to eat it now before it goes bad. So what does safe harbor look like? Well, first we need a signed contract, which is pretty straightforward, and then a 5% payment. And we heard construction start or begin a project. It sounds more complicated than it actually is, because for most projects at the scale that we're working here, you can achieve safe harbor via capitalized engineering services. So interconnection plan sets, basically design drawings can bring you towards safe harbor. So even before a building has broken ground, we're working with dozens of developers where projects aren't breaking ground until 2027. They're locking in the solar tax credit for projects even this year using pre-development funds. Not every developer has that privilege, but it's an option if you have that. So again, end of 2027 is if you haven't safe harbored, but if you have safe harbored, you have until 2030 based on this July 4th date. Design coordination. In my roles as new construction, in my new construction world, I work a lot with architects, a lot with engineers, GCs, early stage stuff, often well before construction, which is a really good time. We talked about kind of starting early on everything is helpful. So taking steps to incorporate solar in your design process. In the kind of mid-rise multifamily world, we'd say kind of mid-design drawings. So however that equates to your type of project, typically when there's MEP being planned for, that's a great time to also think about solar. And what are you actually thinking about when you're doing coordination? So the obvious kind of low-hanging fruit is a roof layout. So optimizing for moving vents, moving drains, maybe shifting an ERV 90 degrees to make room for a couple more modules. That's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. I think most people think to that. A couple other items though, conduit sizing and routing, interconnection strategy, which has some complexity depending on where you are in Connecticut. It's mostly the standalone front of the meter style system because of the way that the RRES program works. Equipment dimensions and suggested locations. So on certain project sizes, equipment can be pretty large. So thinking like 12 feet of width for inverters on a pretty large multifamily project. We don't necessarily want to paste that in at the very end of construction and get in the way of a parking lot or a main entrance or something like that. And lastly, the kind of nugget I'll highlight here is the structural capacity coordination. I'll speak more specifically about flat roof projects. We do a lot of those. Most of them will use ballasted racking systems, which is sort of cement ballast blocks weighing down the solar panels. A good rule of thumb, we like to suggest 10 to 12 PSF of dead load capacity to optimize a couple different things, which I'll talk about in just a second. But also great to think about consolidating solar panels as close together as possible to have collective downforce. So we're going against seismic and wind loading constraints. So the more modules and panels we have together, the better they can do that with just ballast blocks as opposed to adding in lots of mechanical penetrations, which generally for passive house we want to avoid. For anything, it's generally good to avoid. Last item here is requesting a ballast map early. A ballast map is essentially a structural design that shows us where and how many attachments might be required based on building constraints and the current design. So I wouldn't necessarily suggest that we need to think about blocking or trusses or anything like that, but if we have a kind of a baseline understanding of, okay, we've got 10 PSF to work with, roughly how many mechanical attachments might be required for this building. Could be 0, could be 50, and there's some cost considerations there as you're thinking about that, especially for folks that are owning systems themselves. Benefits, of course, fewer mechanical attachments and more predictable costs. Here's a sort of case study example. A little light on the TV there, but so this is one project I'm zooming in on, which kind of did a great job in one way and a kind of medium job on the other, which is we were able to work with Savin PSF, which is not the most, but it's fine. And what it allowed for is 12 mechanical attachments on a relatively compact, pretty sizable array of just one block. So we like a one block as opposed to a panel here, a panel there. But the 7 PSF meant that we're still dealing with some attachments. This is a passive house building. Ultimately 12 attachments on a building of this size wasn't that big of a deal. But it's worth considering if you're thinking about early coordination. Obviously a retrofit building or a late construction building, you're not going to adjust your structural calculations. But again, thinking about this early, usually the cost implications are pretty pretty moderate. Underwriting. This is something we've been doing a lot more recently with affordable housing, lenders, and developers. It's just thinking about building all of this into pro formas and into your budgets as early as possible. Because operational savings that come through on-site solar can increase debt service coverage ratios, so increase the ability to pay back your permanent loan and increase borrowing capacity. To say nothing of increased LIHTC basis for solar projects that have additional LIHTC basis available. And then what really gets underwritten ultimately gets optimized and defended, and it gets attention versus throwing it in last minute. You might get a couple panels on there. It might be less cost effective. So I'll look at an example of what an underwriting kind of detail might look like. So this is a project here in Connecticut, 230 kilowatts, so also pretty sizable on a mid-rise flat roof building. The cost was $733,000. And to break that out, if we're dealing with about a 40% tax credit here, so I believe this wasn't a LIHTC deal, but it was affordable housing. So it qualified for 40%, showing the capital benefits versus operational benefits. So I'll start with capital here because we started there. Federal tax credit is often utilized by a LIHTC investor, a LIHTC syndicator. Again, thinking about that early, because if you introduce the tax credit to a LIHTC syndicator late in the game, they're likely to say no thank you. Or by transferability, which is a way to essentially sell or monetize that tax credit in a moderately simple process, which we can talk more about if you'd like. And accelerated depreciation, so for whatever reason, the beautiful big bill sunsetted the solar tax credit, but it gave us single-year accelerated solar depreciation, which if you're an owner or a builder or a developer that can take advantage of that, great. If that's lumped into the conversations about the sale of the tax credit, also great. And then on operational benefits, so we talked about the RES program, a projected benefit of $72,000 in year one. If you think about adjusting that for conservative underwriting, we suggest throwing in 85% of that projected benefit to accommodate equipment downtime and weather-related circumstances. So pretty straightforward, but if you introduce this pretty early, if you already got a pro forma that's thinking about how much what utility costs will look like for a building, this can be really beneficial. Just want to also shout out that third-party projects, third-party agreements like PPAs, or solar leases or things like that, often trigger lender, investor, state agency funding approval requirements. So if the solar project is not being built into the budget exactly and won't be owned by the building, you'll often want to think about this. So organizing this underwriting material and documentation in advance of those requests is definitely advised. Connecticut Green Bank does this. Resonant also does this for our projects. So to take this away, 3 nuggets. Strong incentives, even as we have a kind of phasing out solar tax credit, we still have a pretty strong state incentive here in Connecticut. So with the tax credit, it's kind of a no-brainer. Without it, it's definitely worth thinking about building into your budget. Early design coordination can kind of pay dividends going forward. If you think about attachment costs, if you think about maximizing sort of economies of scale on the roof and designing optimized layouts. And lastly, underwriting to maximize benefit. So thinking about the cost of all of this really early, building it into LIHTC basis where that's appropriate, reducing operational budgets to accommodate potentially larger borrowing capacities when that is available. Thank you. Pass to Carla from Savin Winter.
Great, thanks for hanging in here. I'll be the closer. I'm Carla Butterfield with Savin Winter Associates. We are making buildings better, basically. Anything that makes buildings better, we'll do it. We are on the Eastern Seaboard. We've been in business for 55 years. I've been with Savin Winter for 19 of those. Savin Winter Associates was started by Savin Winter, who is now almost fully retired, although he still is the chair of our board. And we are an employee-owned company, which we're really proud of. I support our Somerville, Massachusetts office, and I'm strictly in the residential sector. Even though we touch all buildings, including accessibility of buildings, energy efficiency, trainings, as Nick mentioned earlier, I work in the residential sector in new construction or complete gut rehabs, and am typically working in multifamily, affordable and market rate, senior care facilities, senior campuses where there might be like independent living, townhouses, memory care, skilled nursing care, as well as university housing. There's a lot of, in the greater Boston area, a lot of dorm projects that are either owned by the universities or owned by private entities building on university housing. So we're working on those buildings as well. I want to talk a little bit about the third-party consulting. We heard about the HERS rater that Matt works with. There aren't that many in the state of Connecticut. It's a pretty small state with regard to construction. There's more competition in New York and Massachusetts with regard to third-party consulting. We often wear many hats, or use alphabet soup for all the programs we work with. So not only the HERS ratings, but we're layering on certification programs. They're often tied to financing or investors. European investors in particular want to know that the buildings are more durable and sustainable, and therefore they will require certification. Sometimes they're a part of the International Energy Conservation Code. And then with regard to the programs and incentives, sorry, I clicked a little too fast there, we're often tied, as Nick said, to a next tier. So we're talking about energy, and then we're talking about indoor air quality, and then energy efficiency that rolls right into water efficiency, materials and resources, and then homeowner education. I like that Matt mentioned the warranty on their homes. It's incredibly important that we not just leave the buildings once they're built. And then I'm going to cover a case study. So with regard to third-party consulting and certification, you can think of it as sort of a stepping program. We have the International Energy Conservation Code, which is always our base. Whether it was the 2006, the 2009, the 12, the 15, the 21, where we are right now in Connecticut and Massachusetts, or the 2024, which will be adopted fairly soon in Connecticut, you then can step programs on top of those. We are in a little transition where the Department of Energy just took over Energy Star from the Environmental Protection Agency, so it's no longer under EPA's house, it's now in the DOE's house. As Pretty Good Home used to be called Zero Energy Ready Homes, is actually technically called the Efficient New Homes, because energy is zero energy is a bit of a naughty word in our administration right now, so we're trying to get those words out. Apparently, Efficient New Home is a nicer way to play in the sandbox. But it's all this kind of stepping that you can do. You can add Indoor Air Plus, which was an EPA program that piggybacks on Energy Star. And then the next level, which Nick mentioned a couple of times, is Passive House. There's Passive House Institute US or the Passive House International. Those are two different programs. And then we can get to Passive House Core or Passive House Zero. When you start to look at what investors want, it's often a bigger picture. So those Energy Code Plus programs are going to focus a lot on reducing energy usage, and then also speaking a little bit to indoor air quality, mostly through ventilation. When you look at other programs like LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, they're also including sustainable sites. What are we doing to protect the area that we're constructing on, and how are we leaving that with permanent erosion control measures, for instance, better landscaping, water efficiency, as I mentioned, materials and resources. So programs like LEED are certainly focused on energy and air quality, but then also building out the whole sustainability of the project. And that holds true for other programs like the National Green Building Standard, which is an ANSI-approved standard, which means that it can be adopted as part of code. So NGBS 2020 has been adopted by lots of municipalities across the country as an alternative energy standard. The 2025 NGBS is in the ANSI approval process right now. We expected it to be available for use beginning of the year, but it's been a little bit hung up. Those ANSI approval processes are, if any of you have been a part of them, you probably never want to do it again. They're not easy. So as I mentioned, Connecticut is currently in the 2021 IECC. Is supposed to adopt in July the 2024 IECC. Massachusetts, where I do a lot of my work, also is in the 2021 IECC. Both of those require that any building type have air infiltration testing. There used to be a loophole before 2021, it was closed. It means that no matter what type of building you're building, there will be air infiltration testing that you must do. And then with residential projects, most have to do duct blaster or duct leakage testing. However, Connecticut did carve that out when they amended their code. This is a picture of a whole building blower-door test that we did. It only took 2 fans. Anyone who's familiar with air infiltration testing, you know, if you can do a whole building with just 2 fans, you get a nice tight building. And then just a picture of doing some testing of ventilation. In Massachusetts, when they adopted the 2021 IECC, they stretched it. So to keep these clear in my brain, I like to say if you amend something, you can amend it in any direction, meaning that you can dummy it down a little bit. And that's what Connecticut did when they adopted the 2021 IECC. They amended it, and then they pulled back some of the requirements. One of those was duct testing. If your ducts are all inside the envelope, for instance, you don't have to test, but I'm not going to get into the nuances there. Massachusetts stretched it. They really put it on steroids. So they took the 2021 and said they were going to make it significantly harder and call it the stretch code. There are a lot of reasons why they do that and why communities adopt a stretch code. It's all tied to money, clean energy, community money, for the most part, and goals, but there is money attached to it. And then secondarily, there is another called the Specialized Opt-in Code in Massachusetts, which means that if a community adopts a specialized opt-in code, you are even more rigorous with your energy requirements. And this is a design tree or decision-making chart that we put together just to help everybody kind of figure out what type of building are you and find your way to what code compliance you would have. And if you could follow this, you would see that multifamily over 3 stories in the specialized opt-in communities cannot get through code without doing passive house. That's all there is to it. If you're a different type of building, there are some other options, but that's how rigorous the specialized opt-in code is. And thankfully, along with those sticks, we'll call them, there are some carrots. Just like Connecticut, Massachusetts has really great incentives. Nick mentioned some of the incentives that we find in Connecticut for building better than code and then layering on the green programs for that extra incentive. Massachusetts also has that. This is an example of single family, either detached or attached incentives. And then when we get into the multifamily incentives, you're talking about some significant money per unit for doing passive house level, which I just mentioned was code. So it's kind of like this weird thing, developers will come to us and say, you mean I have to do this, but you're also going to give me about $1 million to do it? And the answer right now is yes. It won't be that way forever. The point is to get everybody up to speed with this more rigorous code and then start to pull away the incentives or make them harder to get and keep moving the bar forward. Because the slide I had before that showed the stepping up to the programs is really, you can reverse it. The whole point is to get to 0, and the only way to get to 0 is to keep stacking those, the more rigor. So I won't go over this again, but basically it just emphasizes the fact that if you are doing passive house, which you must do for specialized opt-in code, you are going to collect a bucket load of money in Massachusetts, which is great. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, we worked with a developer on the 3rd phase. We worked with them also, JHM Financial, on phases A and B. This was Crescent Crossing 1C. It is 86 units in 4 stories. They're FIAS, they permitted a long time ago. They were FIAS Plus 2015 certified. This all happened basically last summer into early fall. Zero Energy Ready Homes version 1, Energy Star Multifamily version 1.2, which they also, in order to be FIAS, had to do the Energy Star Indoor Air Plus and Zero Energy Ready Homes programs. You must. Those are co-requisite programs. And then also LEED V4 Gold. One thing I like about working with this developer is that they do code and better. They set goals according to what is appropriate for their project, but they're always setting goals. The first time I worked with them at the Heights at Darien in 2009 maybe, it was, I don't know if we can do HERS. And the next project was, I think we can do Energy Star. And then it was, I kind of slid in Indoor Plus and didn't tell them until they were almost at the finish line that they were actually getting it. And so it built some confidence and they got there and they keep raising the bar a little bit. But they didn't get there without some rigor. There's a lot of insulation here and we're trying to look at the insulation products carefully to make sure that we're not just throwing plastic-based products at our buildings, but we're being a little smart about what the embodied carbon of those products are so that we're not mitigating all of the energy efficiency by using products that took a lot of energy to create. So we're also investigating, you know, triple pane windows. Are we actually getting the payback in energy efficiency for having an extra layer of glass in there, because glazing has high embodied carbon. So there's a lot of plugging and playing when we're doing our energy modeling and our embodied carbon analysis. They also used central energy recovery ventilation here, which means that the owner is taking the onerous for the cost of the ventilation. But it's a very efficient system. It's been commissioned and retro-commissioned, which is really important to make sure that it's running correctly. They have unitary heat pumps. This was designed before the all-electric incentive in Connecticut came into play, and so they stuck with their natural gas water heaters for this project. And then just typical, you know, Energy Star appliances, etc. And they did plan early for their photovoltaic installation on the roof, which was one of the first pictures of the case study, and you can see I'll just pop it back real quick, took advantage of a lot of that extra space on the roof. Even though they do have condensers up there, it's fewer condensers than if they had been a one-to-one system, because it's a variable refrigerant flow system, heat pumps, which is fewer condensers. And then lastly, they had to go through all of the rigor of the third-party verification process, which in most cases includes some intermediate testing, and that's that middle picture. Took a window, we did an air infiltration test on that window to see if it was, as our weakest link in the building, actually going to pass the air infiltration requirements of Passive House. And after the third try, it did. There were some adjustments that had to happen, and that happens in construction. So they went through that whole third-party process.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank all of our speakers for coming out today, and thank you to our sponsors, the Southeastern Connecticut Housing Alliance, the COG, National Association of Realtors, and the HPRA of the Connecticut River Region. And I also want a special thank you to Helen, who put this all together for us.
And also a special thank Julie for hosting us here today. I echo much appreciated.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, just quick, how many of you work together on different ones? Like you start trying to utilize your resources dealing with maybe even on the same projects, or do you come across each other often?
So I guess I'll start with the CHAPA partnership. So one of the great things that we created for, particularly for multifamily affordable housing, is with that CHAPA application. If you're submitting a CHAPA application, you have to get a letter of participation from the utility. So, you know, it tends to be, you know, if there's 6 applications going in for a particular round, I get 6 requests for letters of participation the day before the application has to go in. So I think that partnership's worked really well.
There's not a lot of affordable developers in Connecticut, so you end up turning the same circles. Massachusetts is a little bigger. I'm definitely going to work with Leonard in Massachusetts now that I've met him, which is great. And then I would say that like SEMA, DEEP has been opened ears about some of the challenges with ground source heat pump installation on a community scale, and as has Nick in the program, because there are some hiccups with modeling it for HERS raters. And so we're just trying to find sweet spots there of how, you know, not to penalize a project, but then to also be very realistic about how much energy ground source heat pumps actually use, because the pump energy is significant. So we're, you know, it's nice because they'll bring us all together. All the raters, all of the developers, we're all on the same calls. Everybody's working toward the same end means.
And these programs, the utility, the rate care program, DEEP oversees part of our RES, a lot of the solar stuff, the weatherization assistance program, a lot of these initiatives. DEEP has some overseas part of this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we still take questions?
Yes.
I'm ready now. I guess the first question would be for Nick. The whole 4 cents for every kilowatt hour generated on solar panels that we're now charging seems like that was a mistake. That Pura allowed that to go through that way.
Is this RS?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's really pushing back on the payoff for residential solar. It's pushing us further down the road. When we reread that law, it actually you have a defined term that's not actually defined until later in the paragraph. But that 4 cents per kilowatt hour, it should have only been charged on things that you put back onto the grid beyond your use. So only that net, but it's actually on every single kilowatt.
I don't disagree in the least, and I can tell you what I said to DJ and Mark at the break about RS, but I can't say it publicly.
The DJ will tell me
that was that was the first thing on my list of to-dos is fix the RS program.
Yeah.
Like it's because I've heard the same. DJ and I, when we first talked about RS, I don't know, like 2 or 3 years ago when it first came out, and like Katie said, 2027, that RS program is sunsetting and something else will take its place. Same way that LREC, ZREC, became NRES, RS. It's one of those things where we just have these growing pains with these solar programs, and it just seems like every couple of years they just rotate into these new programs. So, I'm happy to field the complaints on that. I'm not the RS or NRES guy, but I'm certainly happy to feed that information back to them.
We're hoping
because
that,
I don't disagree.
When it does come out with a new program, it looks like the new program will be better worded, hopefully, based on the hearing that they had. I'm hoping that we can maybe push for retroactive repair of the program. So like the people that we put in place now who are being penalized, maybe can have that restriction removed, and it should be properly allocated. So.
Yeah, and we should chat about that with the RS and NRES people, especially if they're going to be running the program once the new Kira docket comes out.
Yeah. I had a second question. Am I allowed? Or?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Matt. And do you have something else?
Sure. I actually already asked Katie, and we do a lot of HOAs, and sometimes in HOAs when you have townhomes, it's hard to allocate the solar benefit to the homeowner. So we've done it in Cheshire. We're the first ones to do it. Works out pretty good. There's some growing pains there. So the HOA, we paid for all the solar to go on as part of the price of the home. The HOA then benefits from the solar generation that happens on all the roofs. We only put the solar panels on the most efficient areas to optimize the return, and then the HOA gets a nice big check every quarter from Eversource for the generation. It's a full buyback program. That's a great program. We are now doing a different program. We wrote our documents differently in Oxford Greens, where we can we put the solar panels on every single house to the benefit of the homeowner for net metering, minus 4%. 4 cents. But one thing that we're really looking at is we're really trying to figure a way to do a solar lease where the HOA holds the lease, the beneficiary. So then the cost of that is in the lease, the HOA benefits, the homeowners then in turn benefit, or we do it even back to each meter, but the lease would be held by the HOA. So I know Katie's gonna look into it, we're gonna hit you up again, but has anybody heard of any entity like that being able to take a lease, a co-op or an HOA?
I can ask. I can certainly. I'm the efficiency guy. The renewable guys I don't even talk to them. But no, they've had enough people come through NRES and RS at this point that I'm sure we can get some names together. But I'm not entirely, because DJ was talking to me at the break about that a little bit too, and sort of the tricky part with underwriting the 20-year lease for the HOA. I'm not sure I'm not sure.
Who guarantees that?
Yeah, exactly.
We've done condo association that are leases that are backed up by the sponsor developer.
Okay.
Especially when they're
For all 20 years?
for the life, the term of the agreement. Yeah. But that's when you're. We've done one and we're like,
Thank you. I'm done now.
You're all set now, Matt? Okay, thank you very much. So the SEISA is going to be putting on some residential energy efficiency resource fairs in the next month or so. One in the Norwich area, one in the Groton area. Some of the same speakers will be there, but that will be for individual rather than for builders and developers. So again, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to ask Eric Person from the HPRA to say a few words as we close out.
Great, thanks, Norton. That was my slide, by the way. No, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank all the panelists for joining us. Julie, thank you again for hosting us. Second time we've been through your great property here. And Helen, thank you for all the coordination that went into this as well. This is a little bit different multifamily council meeting than we've had in the past, but we've heard a lot about the energy incentives that are going away, so we kind of thought this was a timely topic, especially in the multifamily space. But if you're not involved with our multifamily, it meets the first Thursday of the month, typically from 3:30 to 5, and we move around this date to different projects and things. So we're wrapping up the details on next month's, but first Thursday of May we're getting together again and touring one of the projects in the state. So thank you again. Appreciate everybody's input and feedback.